know the best way to do it because now most of you already know. But Greg and Sam had an ultrasound this morning, and they are out celebrating. They're in Omaha, I think, Sioux City or Omaha, celebrating. And when they got ready to leave, they said, hey, announce to the church what the gender was. They had a gender reveal today. And I said, well, why doesn't Grandpa get to announce what it is? And when I walked in, that's all Grandpa's been talking about. So maybe just to honor Greg and Sam, they found out the baby's gender today, and Grandpa's very excited. So he's going to tell you what the gender is. Just tell everybody what. It's a girl. That's right. There may or may not have been on that video I sent you a little moment where Greg has to wipe some tears because that is what they have wanted during this whole. They would take a healthy baby, of course, that's obvious. But deep down, they have been praying for a baby. Now, you talk about faith, right? If we really believe in rain and you don't carry your umbrella, do you believe that God's going to send rain? No. And so faith has to have works. James says that. So I said, great. What's the name? What names do you have picked out? And Greg and Sam said, well, we haven't really even thought of any. We've got some boy names. Wait a minute. You've been asking God that it'd be a girl, but you have been preparing for a boy. So anyway, now you know it is a girl, and congratulations to Sam and Greg if they're listening on the way home from Omaha. And so they're out, and hopefully they've talked about some baby names now, and particularly girl baby names. However, they're not 100%. Doctors are not 100%, so they should have some boy names in their back pocket just in case. My wife and I always brought 3 names at least with us to the hospital, 3 boy names and 3 girl names, and then we'd stare at the baby and say, does it look like a, or whatever. And so we did that. It drove the nurses crazy because I think we waited 24 hours on both Madison and Nathan to find out. Madison was almost Gabriella, but we just could not see her as Gabriella, and so it ended up being Madison. So we liked the name, but when we looked at her, we said she just doesn't look like a Gabriella. There's another reason too when we were playing with it. You ever take names and then try to make fun of them to see what people will tease them about? And so, right? Anyway, we're supposed to love everybody. Sister Joan. Was that you? Oh, okay. Wow. So we weren't totally crazy, but amen. You're going to hear a bunch of announcements too, just for some of you and maybe for the online folks, as far as all of these events in the district and in the national. Most of the deadlines have passed. For like example, marriage retreat, all of the special rates and the cheaper tickets and the cheaper rooms, they have all expired. But that doesn't limit you from going. That just means you'll have to pay full price for the registration and full price for the hotel. And so, for example, marriage retreat, the registration now is $150. If you would have got it in October, it would have been $80. If you would have got it up till last week, it was $120. And now at the door, it's $150. The room rate was at $119 a night, and that was just released Tuesday as far as the last time you could book to get that cheaper rate. You're still welcome to call down to the hotel and see if they have open rooms or find another room, and you'll just pay $150 at the door. That's a couple. That's for a couple, by the way, couple rate. And that same way with NYAC, we had an opportunity to grab a limited number of pre-ordered tickets so that Greg and Sam, who, if you haven't heard yet, are having a girl, and because they'll be raising this child hopefully correctly this next year, they won't have a lot of time to do a lot of things. So I had an opportunity to grab 10 bus tickets for our youth department so that they could jump on the bus, and all of everything else will be taken care of. As long as they can get the group to the bus, they'll get on the bus, and they'll go to the hotel. The hotel will already be booked for them. All the tickets will be pre-bought for them, and they just have to go instead of trying to scramble and try to find rooms and restaurants and rides and transportations and all that stress. It costs a little bit more money, but those tickets have already been bought because I had to grab them in October. What is going to happen, it's going to open up online. And so here in about 3 weeks, for some of you that want youth tickets, it'll open up online, and you have to go in and purchase yours from the youth online, which will include the hotel. They'll make you choose the hotel at that time too. So it doesn't mean you can't go. It's just that we've already given away the 10 tickets. They're going to help Greg and Sam not stress out. No. From here on, you'll have to, because it's all online, you'll have to put it on your card. And you'll have to sit there because they'll open it up and say, okay, on Monday at 9 a.m., we're going to release all 40,000 tickets. And it's going to say 3, 2, 1, go. And you have to go click, credit card, and all that type of stuff. It's the only way they do it now. So just so you know, it's not saying you can't go to these events. It's just we had an opportunity to grab a couple of things here and there and to save some time. But yes, Indianapolis is where the National Youth Congress is. They're predicting 40,000 people right now. The stadium will hold almost 50,000, but they have went ahead and reserved 40,000 receipts for that. And that is downtown Indianapolis. That's at the Colts, the NFL team's stadium. Everybody's welcome to go. I just took all the stress off of Greg and Sam, said, don't worry about it. You just have a baby. Here's 10 tickets that you can get on a bus and just go to a hotel with. And they already had 10 of their youth sign up instantly for it. And so we have 10 for sure going, and then whoever else jumps in and signs and buys tickets and that type of stuff. And so it's a good time. If you haven't gone, even as an adult, it's incredible to be in a building of 40,000 people singing about the love of Jesus and just the stadium type feel of it. And the preachers they bring in are incredible. As a side note, too, you're going to grab your Bible and go to Proverbs 29. As a side note, I have been in the ministry for almost 30 years, and there has been one conference I've wanted to go to in all 30 years. Anybody know what it is? Because of the times. It is a pastor or a minister's only meeting, and so usually about between 2,000 or 3,000 pastors gather, and it's the one that eventually ends up on YouTube, and every guy's like, man, that was an incredible service. Wish I could have been there. And I get to go this year. I have a friend that called me up and said, I have nobody to go with. Do you mind if I buy some tickets and bring you and your wife with me? And I'm like, well, yeah, go ahead. And so for the first time in my 30 years of ministry, I get to go down to that by invitation of somebody else. Alexandria, Louisiana. I was looking forward to it. We're looking like an Airbnb and a cabin and all these type of things. It's 40 degrees down there right now. What is wrong with the South? You're supposed to be like 70 degrees and sunny. They got snow down there. This is crazy. I looked at one Airbnb and I told my wife, I said, we're gonna rent like quads and go up into the mountains and look at waterfalls and all this type of stuff. She said, oh, that'd be awesome. We'll take just a trip and pack a little day lunch and just do that. Except for it's 40 degrees. And it's colder in the mountain. The conference is officially July 22nd, I think my wife said, or January 22nd. I'll be leaving the 18th, and so I have looked at the projected forecast. It's still 40 in there. So January 18th, which is a Saturday, we leave because Brother Kinney, just so some of you know, Brother Kinney in Ottawa at 65 years old is stepping down from the church. He is retiring from full-time pastoring and from his job. He has been recently diagnosed with ALS, and it also has a side effect of a rapid, is it dementia? Yeah, I think it is dementia. They're going to have a celebration on the 18th, so my wife and I will go over and be part of that, and then we'll head down to Indianola. And Brother Streeter asked me to preach before we head out of town. Now, Brother Streeter's like Tyler. We get done at service around noon at his church, and we're going to pack, and we're going to go into the Ozark Mountains, and spend that first night in the Ozark Mountains. And I'm excited about it. That's a 6-hour trip. And he said, well, we're not stopping for lunch or going to the bathroom. We're just packing sandwiches and snacks. And my wife said, is he for real? I said, yeah, he's a lot like Brother Tyler. I said, well, of course we'll go through some drive-thrus, right? And he said, well, maybe if we have to. So anyway, we're going to have fun. And I also got called today. Can you believe this? You're going to Proverbs 29, verse 18. I got called today by another church. They want me to come and do a marriage retreat for them. Nobody's laughing or saying anything. You're just stunned as I am, too. And so February, I get to go do a marriage retreat. And so, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. So you're in Proverbs chapter 29, verse 18. Proverbs 29, verse 18. A very familiar portion of Scripture where you're at. And I want to teach on this. I hope you brought your thinking caps. Do you have something to write with or a phone you can type into or somewhere where you can add information? We're going to put a little bit of challenge on you. Are you ready? The Bible says in the book of wisdom, in Proverbs 29, verse 18, where there is no vision, the people perish, but happy he that keepeth the law, but he that keepeth the law, happy is he. Happy is he. Now, I also have the ESV version. I can't remember if that's up there or not. Do we have that other version up there or not? A lot of people ask me, well, what does this mean? And you can also put it in the Message version or something. I think we had the ESV up there once. The ESV version says it this way: where there is no prophetic vision, the people cast off restrain, but blessed is he who keepeth the law. Blessed is he that keeps the law. Now, this, of course, isn't the 600 and some laws in the book or even the 10 Commandments, although those apply as well. But this is really the principles. When you have a plan and you stick to the plan, it's going to make you happy. Where there is no prophetic vision, really is what the Hebrew is saying here, where you don't have a thought of the future, you're in trouble. It's going to doom. You're setting yourself up for failure. We say this in English a lot of times. I taught this in Storm Lake, but we say this a lot of times in English. Nobody here plans to fail, right? There's nobody here that says, you know what, I would really like to get up this morning and have a miserable day and just fail. Anybody here that does that? Okay, well, good, because then we'd suggest probably mental health counseling rather than where you're at right now. But I don't know anybody that says, you know what, I'm just going to set out planning to fail. But here's what the rest of that says. Nobody sets out to plan, or nobody plans to fail, but if we fail to plan, we will. We will. Jesus said this in Luke chapter 14. Jesus said this in Luke chapter 14. He said this. He said, which of you intending to build a tower sitteth not down first and counteth the cost, whether he has sufficient to finish it? Which of you that wants to build something doesn't sit down and try to figure some things out? He says in verse 29, he says, lest happily after he hath laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, all that behold it will begin to mock him. He said, everybody starts thinking it a joke when you didn't start off with a plan. And you start feeling bad. There's a lot of people in this room that have just stopped trying to do things because it just seems like it's always a joke. Well, the problem is not that your desire is to do something. Your problem is you don't put a plan together. He goes on further to say this in verse 30, saying that this man began to build and was not able to finish it. Jesus is really challenging you with your vision. He said, listen, how many things are you going to try to do without a plan? And if you don't have a plan, why do you act surprised that it doesn't work out? Now, tonight we're gonna put a vision together. We're gonna put a plan together. I'm not sitting down and actually talking about writing out word for word, although most of us will. And I'm not talking about not sitting and mentally thinking through a process. I'm talking about those type of things. But there are people, we call them run and gun, or I can't remember. There was another term for it that we used to call it in maintenance. They would just run forward without any care or thought or anything like this, and then they would run into problems. And they'd always say, well, I'm a better problem solver than I am a planner. Well, the problem is now we got a mess, and half the time we got to tear it back down and redo it. And it really is a biblical concept that says, listen, if you don't have a vision, it's not going to work. You don't have a vision, it's not going to work. Let me tell you this, now I know that this doesn't apply to everybody, but I find this interesting. I study this every year, and I just found a recent study that says most couples, are you ready for this? Most couples spend on average 528 hours planning for their wedding. Can you think of that? 528 hours. They think about the details for the food that's going to be served, the place that they're going to have the wedding, the dress that they're going to wear, the bridesmaids and the grooms, and they start making all the preparation. And now, in case you didn't know it, men, when you get engaged, you have to have like $4,000 worth of photography equipment there, and catch the surprise moment on some type of special video system or photo and that type of stuff. And we put a lot of pressure on our couples, and so they really try to make this one event something incredible, spectacular. And on average, they will spend 528 hours. If you don't know what that is 22 dedicated days of planning. 22 days in planning an event that lasts between 30 and 40 minutes for the ceremony, about 4 hours for the reception, and a couple of days for the honeymoon. 528 hours. Can you imagine what most couples do when they plan their wedding? Most children, particularly women, but some boys, they dream of that one day ever since they were a child. They think about the white dress. I got a joke from you, and I'll come down to you. You remember, has anybody been to a wedding, like a big, lavish wedding and that type of stuff? You ever take your children to it? So there was a big, fancy wedding, and all of the men lined up, all the groomsmen and the bride lined up, or groom lined up, and then the bride and her bridesmaid all lined up. And she walked in. You know how the doors close and the order, dun, 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 and the doors kick open, and this girl walks in, and her dad has got her arm, and she's got this $10,000 wedding gown on. And it's just like beautiful white, sparkling white. There was a little girl watching this because, she wanted to start thinking. And so she tapped her mom when the doors swung open and she saw the bride. She tapped her mom and she said, "Mommy, why is that girl wearing white dress?" And the mom got choked up and said, "Well, because this is the happiest day in her entire life, dear. And she's dreamed of this moment ever since she was your age. And this is just the happiest day in her life." Well, that little girl sitting in the third row spun up and saw the groom and then tapped to the mom again and said, well, then why is he wearing black? I'll let that sit in just a little bit. Kids are fun, aren't they? Most couples invest a lot of time, probably since childhood, dreaming of that one day. But here's the problem as a pastor. Very few couples spend any amount of time, really considerable amount of time, planning about the marriage that will follow thereafter. They have no plan and no vision. They will think of the one day, but never talk about all the days that will follow after that. Yep. We live in a society that doesn't really encourage vision or plan or thoughts. We can think of moments, but we have a hard time prophetically seeing past simple things. And yet the scripture tells us over and over, Jesus even teaches us, listen, if you're going to start building something like a family or a relationship or a career, or you probably should sit down and give it some thought. Yet most people don't. It's almost as if the enemy wants you to fail, and the best way he's figured out is for you to put no plan together. I'm going to challenge some of you tonight, because we're going to begin to write some vision statements and things like that, and start talking about this. I'm going to challenge some of you tonight. What's the next 5 years look like for you? I don't know. Get old? Just to survive? How about next week? Anybody got some thoughts for next week? Well, I'm going to get groceries. How about 10 years from now? Where are you going to be in 10 years? Sister Alicia, that's depressing. She said dead, probably. Can I go a little bit further? What are you going to be when you grow up? You mean some of you are that old and you still don't have a clue what you're going to be when you grow up? And yet Jesus said, if you have no vision, you have cast off all restraint. There's no rules to follow, and you will fail. And he says this over and over, even in the Gospels. He said, listen, which of you don't have a plan? Did you sit down and count the cost? I know way too many people that have no idea what is going on in life other than just surviving. I just want to make it to Friday, Pastor. You're challenging me. I want to make it to next week. I've got a bill due at the end of the month. I don't know how I'm going to pay that, and so I'm just trying to make it to the end of next month, or to the end of this month. And you wonder why you fail over and over and over. Jesus warned you over and over and over and says, please have a vision, have a thought. Think about what you're doing. Have something you can start working towards. A prophetic vision, a voice, a thought of the future. Pause and think. I know people. I've been in this long enough. I'm going to be 55 this year. Most of the people that I know, always dreamed of going to college, yet are my age and still haven't gone. Why? There was no plan. They like to talk about it. They'll say, someday I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to be this, or I'm going to be doing that, and I'm going to be this. And I'm sitting here saying, dude, we're 55 years old. We're almost to retirement age. When does the plan kick in? Well, I want to help some of you tonight, and again, I'm throwing examples out. This is kind of an introduction tonight, and I know that some of this maybe not apply immediately, but I just used an example of a couple that plans for their honeymoon but doesn't plan for their marriage. Let me ask you this. If you have Google, does anybody know how to use Google? Okay. If you have your phone or something and Google, I know that some of you don't. I want you to type in there and ask Google, what are the top 5 reasons most marriages fail? What are the top 5 reasons? Now, this is just Google. Lack of commitment. No commitment or no vision. No vision. Did you find some? The top 5 reasons. What did Google say? Lack of commitment. Now that's just Google. Even Google knows, and they're going to be pretty similar depending on which one you send. Did you find all of those on there? Communication. It all boils down to communication. And so even the world knows, even Google knows, even the AI knows that says, hey, if you're going to have a successful marriage, here are the 5 danger zones. Here are the 5 landmarks. Here are the 5 problem issues. And yet nobody plans for them. Isn't that interesting? Almost as if the enemy by design said, listen, I don't want you to even think about your tomorrow. I don't want you to have a vision. I don't want you to have a plan. And so if I wanted to avoid these 5 top leads, and let me tell you why I'm saying this. I was talking to someone about a week ago or two, and we were talking about latest statistics, and we generically say as pastors, we say, well, today it's about 50% chance whether a marriage works or not. That's sad. And what we're speaking from is in the church, where the commitment's supposed to be high. 50%. But when you start doing analytics on the fact that most couples don't get married anymore outside the church, here's what it says now. It's getting closer to 80% of all relationships fail. That means you have a 20% or 25% of success rate overall, both church connected to people onward. A 25% success rate of making it together in a relationship. Man, who wants to play those odds? And the odds start getting worse the more you fail. By the time you're into your second marriage or your second relationship or your third relationship, and by the time you add children into the mix, you're getting almost into a 90%, 93 percentile failure rate in that area. Isn't that crazy? And if you come from a family of divorcees, the odds just keep going higher. If you already know how to get out of a marriage, and if you have brothers and sisters that know how to get out of a marriage, and if you're surrounded by people that know how to get out of a marriage, your success rate is not very good. That is crazy. But yet even Google says when we've surveyed all the marriages, here are the top 5 reasons marriages fail. And at the core of it, it's communication. People don't know how to communicate. So if I was making a plan or thinking towards 5 years from now, maybe I would start trying to prevent some of these things by working on them. If I already know what the landmines are, why don't I try to avoid them? Now, I happen to have pastored long enough. I've experienced just about all of these. Most couples have come infidelity. Most couples have come in and had to deal with money issues or communication issues or just about anything on that list, lack of a commitment issues, and they've sat at my desk and say, Pastor, what do I do? Well, you're already in crisis mode. What you should have done is created a vision that defeats or combats these 5 years ago, 10 years ago, before you ever got into this crisis mode. One of the greatest things that ever happened to me is I really liked basketball. I know I don't look like it, but I was starting point guard most of my athletic career in high school. I lettered win. I just loved basketball. And we had a basketball coach walk in. Oh, I can still remember this. He walked in our freshman year, and I had a mullet. Anybody know what a mullet is? Yeah, I had a mullet. And he got up in front of us, and the very first thing he said, all of you that have mullets and want to play on my basketball team, you'll have it cut by tomorrow, or you won't play. Second thing is all of you better go out and find a tie because you'll be dressing up before every game. So on game day, you'll be wearing a tie, preferably a coat, a suit, or something like that. Go out and find one. Now, I already had one, but I had to get rid of my mullet. Which happened. But then the last thing he said, I can still remember, a freshman in high school, he said, and those of you that are in freshman class right now, you have just entered into an area where you either already been tempted to drink alcohol or you'll be drinking alcohol. And if you haven't been tempted to drink alcohol yet, you need to make the decision right now at 15 years old whether you're going to drink or not. And he said, I can tell you right now, if I catch you drinking or you get pulled over and busted, you'll never play basketball here in this high school, ever. And so you need to decide when you're sitting in that seat right there whether you're going to drink or not before you ever get put in temptation. And at 15 years old, I sat in that seat in that auditorium, that music auditorium room, and I made a decision. I said, you know what? I want to play basketball. I don't want to ever drink. So I never drank alcohol until I turned 21. I had come from you've heard my testimony, I've come from a background of alcoholics. I just knew what it would do. So at 15 years old, I just purposed in my heart to set up a plan never to have to face that challenge. And yet in a marriage, knowing what the 5 failure rates are, we don't have any plan. Anybody have a plan right now to prevent any of that? Infidelity is pretty easy. David said, I won't put my eyes on anything that would tempt me or cause me to fail. Here's how every infidelity that I'm aware of in my ministry, in our ministry, that has ever ended up in my desk and talked about it. It started off like this. Somebody is at work and somebody the opposite sex walks by and says, man, you look good. You do something different? You lost some weight or something? Or, boy, you got a new cologne on? That smells pretty good. You got a new perfume on? That smells really good. Just something innocent. And David said, listen, if you want to protect yourself, he said, you don't entertain those things. I'm not trying to be rude, but I've only given myself to one woman, and I don't need any compliments or any flower and that type of things. And it's just a warning. Just every time I've counseled a couple, one of the easiest things to do, in fact, the Bible says anytime you're tempted with fornication, what are you supposed to do? Run. Flee. Right. Because it'll be that one day where you haven't had a very good day and nobody's noticed you or anything like that, and you happen to be sitting there at the photocopy machine and somebody goes by and says, man, you do really smell good. What do you put on? And you just start entertaining it. Nobody else notices I smell good. I don't get these compliments at home. So what's your plan? If you don't have a plan, if you don't plan right now, then you have no vision. If you have no vision, you perish. You cause self-esteem, that type of stuff. I as a minister, I've read a lot of different things. Billy Graham would never get on an elevator with the opposite sex alone. He stayed in most hotels. He was a traveling evangelist, and every time he went to a hotel, if he was going up to the room by himself and he walked up and a young lady walked up, he'd open the door for her, said, go ahead and get on, and he'd push the button. He'd stand there and wait. And that sounds silly? No. Yeah. He had a plan. And his plan was a little more complex than you think. He often wrote about it. He said, you never know what photograph is going to be snapped when I step out of the elevator on the other end of this, and what tabloid is going to pick that up and say that I had done this or done that. And the Bible says that we're supposed to flee from the appearance of sin. And so he just established that. We often say in this room, I love everybody, brothers and sisters, and that type of stuff, but I won't counsel a woman by myself. If you want to talk, we got to go get my wife, or we got to get a couple other people. But I won't do that. Not because I don't trust you or trust me or anything like that. I don't even want the appearance of it. I've got a plan. I've put in a plan to protect myself. And to be quite honest, my wife and I have even decided in the last 10 years, even if as a single male, sometimes it's probably wise to bring my wife in and have a little backup, because we live in a society right now that's all about he said, she said type thing. You wouldn't believe how many times people said, no, Pastor, you said that. I'm like, did I say that? Am I going crazy? I asked my wife, well, did I say it? She said, no, I don't think you said that. I'm like, well, I must be losing it. So a plan. What we're going to talk about tonight is vision. Vision. Let's go a little bit further than this. Does everybody have something you can write on? Everybody have something you can write on? One of the top 5 reasons is financial crisis. Is anybody here independently wealthy and you can just... Okay, otherwise I was going to say you're dismissed at this point. Most of us are struggle with finances and all this type of stuff. I feel like the richest guy in town right now because we have eggs. I have security cameras out there. Have you seen the price of eggs lately? I went out 5 times today to gather eggs. I don't want nobody to steal my eggs. They're $5, $4 a dozen. They're $5 a dozen. but anyway, we got 10. Yeah, we got 10. And we just our Easter eggers. We have 2 Easter eggers, so we just started getting blue eggs and green eggs, and they're pretty. And so they taste the same, but it's the point that my wife is happy. Okay, so you have a piece of paper, you have an iPad or a phone or something you can write on. Here's what we're going to do, because we already know that we have to have vision. I have to have some thought. I have to sit down and plan. I've got to have something. Otherwise, I'm just spinning in circles. Are you ready? Financial is one of the biggest struggles. I want everybody to write down your monthly income. What do you make every month? What do you make every month? Here's what I don't want you to do. Don't put overtime in there. No overtime. What do you make in your 40 hours? I know most of you work overtime, but it's not guaranteed. You tomorrow could get set down just to your 40 hours or whatever, 20 hours if you work 20 hours or whatever. What is the smallest amount you know that you're going to make every single month? Because that's what you put, are you ready for this? A budget together on. And you include your spouse, or you can put your double income. And you can put that number in. Now, on a separate side, of course, you can put your bonuses and your overtime and that type of stuff, and maybe you can kind of estimate it's about $200 a week or $150 a week. But that money is not in our bonus. That's extra money. That's extra money. This is how you get ahead. Here, do you realize that there are 3 types of thinking in the world? Poor people are just trying to get it to Friday to pay whatever bill collector's on their back at that moment. So all they're trying to do is live to the end of the week, to the next paycheck. That's how poor people think. People that are in the middle class, all they're trying to do is protect their credit rating. So it's all about what loan they can take out next to get the next house or the next car or the next boat. And so they endeavor. So their focus is not necessarily, we'll say, living paycheck to paycheck, but their focus necessarily isn't that. We want our credit score to be a certain number so that we can get the best loans, so that we can get the best toys, and so that we can just keep living in that. Both poor people and middle class people usually are stuck generations in that rut because that's how they think. Rich people don't worry about credit scores, and they don't worry about paying whatever bills in front of them. In fact, if you ever work for a very rich person as a contractor like I have, sometimes they don't pay their bills for years. I worked for a guy that owed me $1,500 for a year and a half and laughed at me because it would take me more money to take him to small claims court, and he has a lawyer that can fight that for the year and a half than it would to write me that check. So he doesn't worry about what it is week by week that he owes. Here's how rich people think. Rich people think everything in terms of investment. I need to know how my money makes more money in every area. When they buy that $3 million home, guess what they're thinking about? Selling it for $5 million. When they buy that $150,000 car, you know what they're thinking about? Selling it for $200,000. When we buy a car, we're just hoping it makes it for 5 years and right. Right. You're discussing it. So that's what we're going to look at right now. So even a mindset. If we know that every marriage struggles financially and has one of the top 5 leading reasons for failure, let me ask you right now, looking at your monthly income, what's your plan? What's your plan? To remain broke? I'm going to explain to you a little bit why you're broke. We're going to actually put a budget together later on in the lessons, but not tonight. But let me explain this to you right now. Your rent or your house payment is how much of that monthly, not the bonus, not the overtime, but your monthly income, how much of your monthly income should be your rent or your house payment if you own a house? Anybody know? 25%, a quarter. If you're making $1,000 a month, you can only afford about a $250 rent payment or house payment. That's it. If you're going to live, if you're going to survive. If you want the stress off of your family, if you don't want the infighting, if you don't want to bicker about buying a candy bar and those type of things, they say you can only afford 1 week's worth of expense. Here's what the bank will tell you. Oh, come on, you work overtime. You're going to make more money next year. And so you can easily, banks will try to push you to, and credit lenders will try to push you to 50%, 2 weeks worth of your pay. Somewhere between 40 and 50, 43, 48 is typically where their threshold is, but they'll push you all the way to 50% of your income just to buy that house. And they will tell you you can do it. You can do that. It's a lot of stress on your family when you're planning and having a vision, and the Bible tells you you're going to fail. Only 1 week is what can get that stress off your back if you try to budget within that. Now, it's technically 26%, like 26.3%. But we say 1 week's, as a rule of thumb, 1 week's wages. Here's something even interesting. If you want to buy a home, if you want to live by the mentality, your vision is this: double your annual salary. And that's the home you can afford to live without the stress that kills marriages. So if you make $50,000 a year, how much a home can you afford? $100,000 home. And that's what your target should be. That gets you back into 1 week's worth of income so that you and your wife and your family don't feel stress and you're not at each other's throat, knowing that this is one of the top 5 reasons why marriages fail. And guess what happens when your marriage fails? The other person gets half of that. And if you have the job, you have to sell the home and split the profit of that home. Or if you're in deficit, if you're upside down, you have to pay that off. I tell, just so you know, if your spouse comes to me, if your wife comes to me, for example, and says, my husband has had infidelity and I want a divorce and that type of stuff, here's what we first saw. First of all, we say God doesn't believe in divorce, right? But Jesus said in Matthew, he said there's one reason that we have to allow divorce if you can't work through it, and that's infidelity. And so when that happens, here's what I tell that spouse as well. He's been we don't believe in divorce, and I think if you can work it, we can work it through. Let's work it through. But if he's out already with another woman and that type of stuff, here's what I tell your wives: take him for everything you can. I want that person so hurt and so broken that if they tell anybody else in the church about divorce, they're going to say, it's a bad idea. Don't do it. I'm so broke. I won't get out of this debt for 30 years. I don't have 2 nickels to rub together. That's the advice your pastor is going to tell them. I want you to hurt so bad that you never think about leaving another person in your entire life. Okay? But until that time, when you're planning and visioning and that type of stuff, and hope that never happens, because that's one of the areas we're gonna talk about at one point too. Until that time, have a plan financially. Okay, so I have a monthly income, and I don't know what it is. Let's say $1,000. I'll make $1,000 a month. What is the next bill that I'm supposed to pay? Anybody know? Nope. Tithe. 10%. That's God's first fruit. That's not between you and God. I'm sorry, that's not between you and the church and you and the pastor. It has nothing to do with that. God says, I'm going to bless you with a job, and you're going to make an income, and the very first thing you do is you pay $10,000. Yeah, you pay $10,000. 10% back to the church, or back to the storehouse, really is what he called it, but not to the church or the pastor, but between you and God. That's what you're commanded to give. Anything beyond that is called what? Offering, but that's not the next on the list. So I've met my commitment to God, and me and my wife are having a vision. We're making a plan. That's where I want to get to. If you're not there yet by now, here's what I recommend some couple. It just works. I can't explain it all the time why it works, but it's incredible. But start with something. Put that as the top. When you get paid, set something aside. Say, I'm gonna give this to God. You got to start somewhere. You got to start making it a muscle memory or a deal. But the next, you know who the next person is you pay? Yourself. Before you pay the gas man and the utility and the house rent, that type of stuff, the next person biblically you're supposed to pay is you. Here's what you're supposed to do. Again, whatever the plan is, I'm not here to tell you got to put $2.55 aside. If you don't have $1,000 in an emergency fund, you are planning to fail. And so the very first thing you're supposed to do after you've met your commitment with God, and what He's commanded you, is to put a savings aside and the goal is to get to $1,000. Now, I would say there are very few people in this church wide, Storm Lake, Sheldon, Pentecostals, that have $1,000 set aside. Why is $1,000 important? If you go on the way home today and you blow a tire, guess what? You're going to be spending about $200, $250, $150, $200, $300, somewhere in that area, to replace that tire. You know what happens between you and your spouse if you blow a tire tomorrow? You start a fight. How are we going to pay that? I don't know how we're going to pay that. How am I supposed to get to work? Nobody's going to borrow me a car. I don't know what to do. I ain't got nobody to pick me up. And you start this fight because you had no plan. And when there's no plan, you have a vision. If your water heater goes out in your home tomorrow, anybody know what that's going to cost you? About $1,000. If you have to replace it, if they can repair it somewhere between $208 or $280, $200 and $800. This is why we say $1,000. If you don't have $1,000 set aside, you're one emergency away from a divorce because you will fight. You'll go into nervous breakdown. You'll say, hey, the water heater just went down. Thank goodness the Lorenz Plumbing can fix it, but it's only going to cost us $600. Give me $600. I'm going to say, we just went through Christmas. We don't have a penny left. In fact, we're going to be in trouble because the credit card bill is going to come, and we can't pay that. And so now we're going to have to live in a house where there's no hot water. And a fight breaks out. And then you're going to call the pastor and say, Pastor, we're not working out real well. Can we get some marriage counseling? Why? Well, we can't pay our bills. You know, I'm just going to tattle a little bit. I've had somebody walk into this church years ago, and they said this, Pastor, I'm behind on my cable TV bill. Can you give me $650? $650. They were about 6 months behind. And they were serious. They were a little mad. I'm like, I'm sorry. We all pretty poor in here. We're all trying to get into the middle class. And here's what's funny. In that same year, I had someone call me. They were in the bathroom, and they were mad because they had just bought a 60-inch television, and their internet went out, their high-speed internet, and they couldn't watch anything. And they wanted to know what we could do to help. Now, I happened to be sitting in the living room when they called, looking at my, at that time, 28-inch television with no internet. And they were complaining they had just bought, and at that time, a 60-inch television 10 years ago was somewhere around $1,200 to $1,800. And my 28-inch television we were looking at, and we were running little DVD tapes and stuff in, was from my wife's high school graduation. It still had a tube on the back end. It's one of the, yeah, when you got a hit, you know. Isn't that crazy? People's expectation. So again, the next thing you need to do is to somehow set aside $1,000. And nobody finds this easy, but if you don't start putting $1 aside, 50 cents aside a week, 25 cents aside, you'll never get in the habit or have a muscle memory to do that. You've got to start walking towards that. When my wife and I first got married, my aunt called, or I'm sorry, not my aunt, my sister-in-law called my wife Christmas Eve, our first year of marriage. So we've been married almost a year, and this is what she said. She said, Dana, you're not going to believe it. It's a Christmas miracle. Mom is going to have a kidney transplant. We are taking her down to Minneapolis, Minnesota to have a Christmas miracle. She's going to go in for surgery right away and get a kidney. Can you get down here? If you get down here, you can stay with us in the hotel or stay at your sister's house, and we've got food and everything, but you've got to be able to get down here. Well, it was Christmas Eve. We had blown all of our money on presents. But God did something for me that year. We had just gotten into church. So this actually been the second year because we had just gotten into church. And God told me to put $1 in a drawer every week, $1, and stop having pop and a candy bar for one day. So for every week, I put $1 instead of going to the vending machine and getting a pop and a candy bar. I put $1. We weren't rich by any means. I started off my first job. I was making $12,000 a year. My second job, I was making $18,000 a year. That's where I was at that moment. And so $1 was a big deal. So I put $1 aside every week in that year. Then when that phone came in, I had $52 in that drawer. Guess what she had to come up with? Gas money to get down there. That was it. So I proudly rolled up all of those $1 bills and handed her and said, go be with your mom on Christmas. Can you imagine? Could you imagine if we didn't have any type of plan for the emergency? Who would have thought Christmas Eve from Royal, Iowa, she would have to get all the way to Minneapolis, Minnesota, to be with her mom on Christmas Eve after we had spent everything we could spend on presents. And so everybody in this room should at least set aside $1,000. That's called an emergency fund. Somebody asked me last night, well, what do I do when I get to $1,000? Keep saving. But that goes into your dream. You know, that vacation where you want to go to Hawaii or whatever, or you want to buy that home or that new car that you want to get or whatever. That's where that savings goes. Until the $1,000 is saved, you don't have an emergency fund, and you don't have a plan that's going to prevent divorce in your home. And that way, this is why you have to do it. I taught this several months ago, and one person came up to me and said, Pastor, I'm up to $5,000 in my emergency fund. You know what I told them? Stop! Put $4,000 in your happy fund and leave the $1,000 out. And they said, well, what if I use some money out of my $1,000? Then replace it. Then you go right back to the beginning and you build that 1,000 back up. The 1,000 is the next. After you pay your tithes, the 1,000 is the next focus. I've got to get 1,000 set aside. Got to get 1,000 set aside. And then, of course, housing and roof and that type of stuff. So I didn't really want to get into that deep, but nobody has a plan. We know what's going to kill our relationships, but we have no vision. We have no prophetic thought. We have no hope for the future. We have nothing that goes forward into that. What if? And so we're failing to plan. And if we fail to plan, we fail. We'll do a budget, and I want you to keep those numbers kind of in mind. We'll do a budget at one time. We'll sit down and do a budget because a lot of people don't know how to do a budget and how to prepare and how to get out of some of the hole. Anybody know the best method to get out of debt? Anybody know what one of the best methods? You pay the lowest one off first, as fast as you can. Whatever you can do. If you add $5 to it, you add $5 to it. If you can add $10 to it, you add $10 to it. You set all of them else at the minimum, and you work on the lowest fruit or the quickest one you can pay off. And when you pay that on off, what do? You take that exact same payment and you set it on the next one, the next lowest one. And you pay that one off. When that happens, when you pay those two off, what do? You take that total payment and you put it onto the third one. And it just starts snowballing. You'll be amazed. Some of you, it'll take 2 years to get out of debt just by practicing something simple like that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. $1,400. Yep. Yep, you'd be amazed how much your pocket change at the end of a week you throw into a dish or a deal, that type of stuff. My wife and I, and we've done this with our kids, we don't step over anything. Like, we see a penny on the ground, we pick it up. Not because we're pinchers or that type of stuff, because we've learned this principle. There's a principle that if you celebrate God in the smallest things, He can trust you with the bigger things. So it's not that we want that penny and that's, we're going to get rich out of that penny. We hold that penny up and say, God, thank you for the smallest blessings. And we've learned that God can then trust us with everything. We taught our kids this ever since they're little. Madison was incredible because she went immediately from a penny to a quarter, and her praise started getting louder and louder. Till all of a sudden she was picking up $50 bills and $100 bills. I kid you not, she was walking in town here in Marathon and found a $100 bill blowing across the street one day. And she picked it up. She said, Dad, you ain't going to believe this. So I said, well, we're going to go up to the city office because it was up by the city deal. I said, we're going to go up to the city office and we're going to tell them. And so we gave it, I don't remember who it was at that time, Deneen or something. Deneen had the strangest look. She said, what are you doing? I said, well, we found this was blown out there by the gazebo or whatever. We figured someone was coming to pay their bill. She said, well, nobody came in short. I said, well, you hang on to it for a week or two. If someone calls, then we'll give it back. Nobody called. So Deneen had the biggest smile on her face when she called and said, Madison, can you come up here? And gave her that bill. And she just celebrated. So you got to believe now, even my 21-year-old daughter, is that what Madison is? 20-year-old daughter. She's running around us every time we go somewhere. She's like this. She gets out in the parking lot, just like, hey. And God has just rewarded that. But again, we're talking about plan, or we're talking about vision. Can I ask you this? 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse number 2. 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 2. Now, this is specifically speaking about a servant or a minister, but it is something that Jesus mentioned several times. He says this, moreover, is it required in stewards that a man be found faithful. Anybody know what a steward is? Similar to a disciple, but it's someone that takes care of what you've been given. You've been received a blessing, and God expects you to become a good steward of this. So much so that when he handed out talents, remember that story? There was only one person that got in trouble, and it was the one person that didn't do anything with what God had gave him. And so the principle is here is as good stewards, you need to become faithful. You need to do something with what God gave you. If God gave you a talent or an ability or a strength that you can do better than anybody else, guess what happens when you get to heaven? He's going to say, what did you do with it? Well, I didn't do anything. I didn't have a plan. God's going to say, actually, what he said is, depart from me, you faithful, or you awful and wicked servant. He said, I gave you something, you didn't do anything with this. If God gave you a great marriage and you waste it, you're going to be in trouble. And so a steward is someone that takes care of something or a blessing or a disciple that really tries to hang on to what God gave them and do something with it. And so really, again, tonight is more about the vision. So let me ask you this. And again, I know this doesn't apply to everything, but let me start with this first. Do you have a personal vision statement? Has anybody ever sat down and started writing out what you're going to do next year, a month from now, 5 years from now? Does anybody know where they're going? Jesus said, if you don't, then you're going to perish. Let's go a little bit further. If you're in a relationship, what's your vision for that relationship? If you're in a marriage, what's your marriage vision? What is your vision for your... Tyler wants more kids. Oh, okay. I thought that's what you said. Seriously, I had my glasses off. I was trying to read your lips. I'm like, you want more kids? Put the glasses on. Here's the difference. Some of you may not know the difference. There are two types of statements that you have in your life. Let me go a little bit further. When God saves you, that fulfills one will in his mind or in your life for him. But there are two wills. Do you know what the second one is? The first one is to get you to salvation. The second one is for you to become useful. He built you for something. He's keeping you here for something. Nobody is here by accident. You have a purpose. God put something in you that he didn't put in hardly anybody else, if anybody else. And so the second will of God, once I am saved, the second will of God is to be used by God. That's the gift. Well, I don't have a vision. Do you think that's going to make him happy? Why doesn't my life always work out? Because you're not fulfilling the second will of your life. Well, I'm saved. Good. Great. Sit on the counter and collect dust, I guess. I don't know. Hope that heaven is your home. But the second will is you're not junk. God made you for a purpose. He built you for a purpose. I often say this. Can the toaster really get upset that it's not producing ice like the ice machine? No, because it wasn't created to do that. And we spend a lot of our time frustrated. We're saying, well, I want to be that. Well, you're a toaster. Make toast. Well, why can't I make ice? Because the creator, the manufacturer, didn't make you to make ice. He made you to make toast. He gives the vision. Right. Right. And so we'll talk a little bit about that too. Like, how do I know? You know. How do I know? You know. But how do I know? Well, we'll talk a little bit about that, okay? But let's do this for a minute. Since we brought up the example of marriage, and we know what the top 5 reasons for a marriage to failure, let's work on some of those real quick again. What's your vision statement for your marriage or your relationship? I know this doesn't apply to everybody, but it's the example, right? Well, I have no vision for my marriage. there's your problem. You have no plan. Communication's an issue. Here's what I'm going to challenge each of you to do. You've been writing and typing, and we've been talking about budgets, and we know that's a frustration, and we talk about this type of stuff. I'm going to challenge every one of you in your relationship. Maybe it's you and your best friend, or maybe it's you and your, whatever, you and your brother, you and your sister. By the way, pray for my brother. He had surgery today. He has cancer. We've been praying about that, and he had surgery, and he'll be recovering in a hospital for a couple of days, and then he'll be home for probably 2 or 3 months. But pray for him. He's the type that he wouldn't tell me. Actually, my mom told me, hey, do you know your brother's going in for surgery? I'm like, nope, he didn't say a word. That's just how guys are, though. But anyway, pray for him. But maybe it's between you and a family member. Maybe there's a relationship you need to restore. What's the vision? So here's what my wife and I did. We worked on a vision this last year. It's just in draft form. And so here's the difference. A mission statement speaks to your character or purpose in life. I am built for this. That's your mission statement. That's what God's assigning you for a mission. That's not what we're talking about. A vision says, I'm going to prophetically speak to the future. This is the chart or the path that I want to create. Hopefully, it better be towards the mission, because if you're walking away from the mission, Jonah, you're in trouble. So though they're very similar in the fact that one states who you are, and the other one states where you're going. Okay? So don't get confused. Don't say, well, I have to solve out and figure out what I'm going to be when you grow up. No. This is a vision statement. And so my wife and I, we looked at our marriage and said, let's speak prophetically to the future. What do we want to create in our marriage? And here's what our vision statement is for our marriage. It is this: because of the gift that God has given us in each other, we recognize as a gift, we want to manifest the love of God within our marriage by valuing each other this way or by this. And then we created a bunch of bullet points to say, we just stopped, and we're still adding to it. We're like, well, where can I manifest love, the love of God to you in these areas? Knowing that communication or money or any of these are failures, these are the things that we're going to have to defend against. And her first one, she looked over to me and she said, well, I would feel loved by you if you would honor me in time, as in the physical definition of time. And I said, in what way? And she said this way, that you would make sure that I am home every night before 11 p.m. I would feel valued. I would feel loved. I would feel that you have some thought for me or some plan, or that you're thinking about me through the love of Jesus, that you would get me home but before 11 p.m. Now, that's pretty easy, isn't it? If I'm going to fulfill one of the parts of the vision, I'm simply going to make sure she's home and getting ready to go to bed around 11 p.m. Most of my pastorate, it was not that way. Do you know that most of the first 15, 18 years of our ministry, or even 20 years of our ministry, I would typically be here in this church till 2 or 3 in the morning talking to someone? Or be on the phone talking to someone in counseling, or rush off to help someone stranded, or to help them work through a problem. And most of our early pastorate, our first 20 years, which means most of our pastorate, I would sacrifice time, and she would not feel loved because of all the fires that need to be put out at the church. And so one of the things that she said this year is just have me home by 11. That's all I ask. Pretty simple, right? Now we're communicating. Now we're starting to fight against future problems that are going to destroy our marriage. She said, well, what about you? When we talk about time, what way can I honor you or let you feel loved or feel the manifestation, because I see that you're a gift to my life? What can I do? Here's what I said. Well, when it comes to time, I just want little moments of your time. I want you to walk by and put your hand on my shoulder. I want you to hold my hand in church. When we get in the car, I want you to reach over and just touch my knee. I just want little moments of time to let me feel loved, that you're sitting beside me, that we're in this together, and that we're working on this. Just little moments. Now, my wife's love language is not words of affection per se, or quality time per se. But mine is words of affirmation. And so I just said, hey, can I have just little moments? Just through the day, just think of me and walk by and put your hand on my shoulder and say you're doing a good job, or just reach over and touch my hand. Is that hard? No. But now we're starting to defend against all the failures that even Google knows are traps against marriage. And so I ask you today, what's your plan? What vision statement do you have for your marriage? Tyler said that his vision statement is he wants to have more kids. And so he wants he wants a quiver. No, that wasn't it. I'm sorry. Okay. Do you even have a plan? You have a vision. How about personally? What's your vision statement personally? I want to sit on the couch until the rapture happens. That's a horrible plan. That's a horrible plan. Does that manifest the mission? Did you? You want to make yourself a career. There's where you start. It doesn't have to sound fancy, or you don't have to have all this King James language. You just put something down in your mind or a piece of paper. I like it in written so you can see it. And say, I am going to walk towards this in the future. I want a career. What's your vision statement? To get your house. In 5 years from now? In 10 years from now? Everybody's got to have a vision. I wanted to introduce this because I want to start doing some stuff in the next couple of months, or maybe even next couple of, not every single time we get together, but I want to take a couple of times and put some lessons together and says, hey, let's start creating a plan. Let's start being vocal. I told Brother Tyler when he comes in front of the board and they ask him what's he going to do with his ministerial license, he probably should have a plan. Do you know that 90% of the candidates come in front of the board and they say, I don't know. I just want to be used by God. Well, then why are you here? What's the piece of paper going to do that's going to make you used by God? Well, nothing. Okay? So what's the vision? I don't know. It was funny because when Tyler came this last time, just a couple of months ago, or October, whatever that's been, 2 months ago, he looked the board straight in the eye and he said, I'm going to be the next pastor. And then he left the room and they all turned to him and went, oh, did he just challenge you? I said, no. He has a plan. He has a vision. We've tried to talk about it openly and somewhere in the future. Why wouldn't you? It's God-given. I know what I'm supposed to do. So he plans to save me, and then he plans to make me useful. But I have a vision. I want you to stand with me. I know some of you are really, really struggling, and here we are, the new year. Did anybody plan to lose weight this year? You don't want to gain anymore? What's the plan? Some of you have already stopped. I think, what is today? Is it the second week of January is the official quitter week? Something like that? Anybody plan to lift weights this year? Going to get stronger? No? Is it the second Friday? I knew it was something like the second is the official quitter. That's tomorrow. Yeah, that's tomorrow. That's official quitter's day. That's right. No commitment. God tells you which of you are not going to sit down and make a plan. And where there is no vision, people perish. They cast all respect because there's no rules to live by. If your plan was to lose weight and you keep going to the donut shop and buying a dozen donuts, you don't have a very good plan. You don't have very good vision. Here's what I did. This is for Tyler. I asked Google, that AI that's in there, I said, hey, Google, or hey, AI, or whatever her name is, hey, ChatBT, or whatever. Yeah, Chat. I said, write me a marriage vision statement. And it said, sure, no problem. He said, and then it says, here is the statement. You can customize it to reflect your values or your aspirations, your vision. And a computer wrote this. We envision our marriage as a partnership rooted in love, respect, and mutual support. Together, we'll aspire to create a nurturing environment where we can grow individually as a couple. Our relationship will be built upon open communication, trust, shared values, allowing us to face life's challenges hand in hand. We will commit ourselves to celebrating each other's success and comforting each other in times of need. We will prioritize quality time together, fostering our strong emotional connection through shared experiences, adventures, and our home will be a haven filled with laughter, kindness, and understanding. We will navigate the life's journey. We will pledge to continually to learn from each other, embracing challenges and grow. Together we will aim to build a legacy of love that inspires those around us and contributes to positivity in our community. We are dedicated to nurturing our love, cultivating joy, and facing the future with hope and excitement. A computer wrote that, folks. A computer wrote that. And you have a hard time coming up with a vision? Even the dumb AI knows what you should probably have in your vision. Are you ready? I want to pray for you. It is required of students that they be found faithful. You ready to pray? Father, in the next several lessons, we're going to talk about each of these things, and we're going to start creating vision statements and understanding mission statements. And God, we're going to dedicate ourselves to start talking about the future and planning for the future and working within our means and making better decisions, being faithful stewards to what you've given us. We will celebrate you every step of the way, God, and we'll bring glory to your name by what you'll do through us. We thank you for the principles in the Bible, and we will apply them and start becoming more faithful disciples to them. We'll give you glory and honor in Jesus' name, and let the whole church say amen. Amen. Now go home and save your $1,000.